All right, guys, we are going to talk about emotional processing and disconnecting. As a new nurse, it's really hard to go through a tough shift and then kind of turn things off and go home. I get a lot of messages from new nurses about how challenging this is. So I wanted to talk about this specifically with John because he has experience in this. So let's just dive in. You ready? All right. So being able to turn off is such a big challenge. It's not something that is like innate and something that we just know how to do. Especially if we have a really stressful shift. And I think a lot of new nurses, most of their shifts are very stressful. Right. Do you have any thoughts or advice on how to handle that?
I do. I think it's worth pointing out, I mean, every job has stress. People can come home from their job like, man, I'm tired, it's been a rough day. Not all jobs have what I would call vicarious trauma attached to them, where you are with people going through trauma and you are kind of experiencing it secondhand. So, I mean, it's also secondary trauma. Okay,
yeah, so wait, the definition of vicarious trauma and secondary trauma, same thing. Can you just...
It's basically you experiencing traumatic effects as a result of walking through other people's trauma, hearing about it, seeing it. Mm-hmm. Those effects start to have an impact on you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I wanted to make sure that people understood that the vicarious trauma piece of it. So important to recognize that not all jobs have that.
Right. So I think before I get to, the actual act of, okay, I just had a really traumatic shift and I'm going home, it's just worth pointing out all the corny things you hear about taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. Kind of doing your work early. So little things practically like, I know I have this job that's traumatic. Am I sleeping the way that I should be? Am I eating the way that I should be? Am I exercising? Am I doing things that promote rest? Kind of give my brain some time to relax? Am I actually expressing the things that are going on? Am I taking care of my life in a healthy way before I even go to my shift? Because all that stuff builds up.
It does. It really does. And it takes quite a toll.
Yeah. And I, to put it in practical terms, like I'll use the analogy of, you have a gas tank, and let's say you have a stress tank, and every day you start on full, or maybe one day you start on full. Throughout the day, a little bit of that fuel is being taken out because of stress. Mm-hmm. And if you're not finding ways to put that fuel back in, which can even just include living well, taking breaks, exercising, those kind of things, you could be starting the next day maybe at half a tank. Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to go in and it just keeps dwindling unless you're taking good care of yourself.
Yeah, and then you add that to like being a new nurse, and then like you already have so much stress. Like as an experienced nurse, you go in, you kind of know how to navigate situations. Right. But then when you are a new nurse, you don't, and every shift is kind of scary.
Yeah.
So if you're not being proactive, it can make that even worse.
Right.
So, but for the person like transitioning home. Right. So, okay. So basically make sure you're taking care of yourself first.
Yeah,
Step one.
Do your work early, and just be aware that, it's not just about that ride home and how can I go home and be okay. It's about living well, because that'll all culminate to making that easier.
Okay.
Now, when you're actually doing that, some things that I've talked to people about before, it's almost like learning how to transition well. So one thing like kids struggle with is transitioning from one activity to the next. That's something kids have to learn. Mm-hmm. And some kids, they'll use a teddy bear, and like that teddy bear goes with them to transition. Or they have to be like, hey, this is the next thing we're doing, and you look forward to it. When kids clean up, they have a cleanup song. Mm-hmm. As adults, I think there's still an aspect of that concept that fits, where we have to learn how to kind of soothe ourselves into the next thing, and especially when you're coming from something traumatic.
Yeah.
So I think there's various ways to do that, and you kind of have to find what works for you. I definitely recommend kind of a debriefing in whatever way you do it. Mm-hmm. I think it's helpful to get that those thoughts, those emotions, that traumatic experience out. There's just research about not keeping everything in your head.
Yeah.
So whether that means, all right, I'm writing some things out about my day, I'm calling someone I trust, being like, my goodness, this is what happened, or even just saying it out loud on the way home.
Yeah.
For some people, music is really helpful. That car ride home can be crucial, of saying, all right, I put on this music, and I almost imagine myself like, as I'm going from work to home, I'm mentally like, I'm changing my outfit, I'm changing everything.
Like I am disconnecting in this process.
Yeah, there's maybe even some like guided imagery in that. Because for some people, they're able to kind of just picture themselves switching, like, okay, I was wearing this hat right now, and this hat got really heavy today. I need to switch. I'm going to take that hat off. I'm going to kind of breathe and let that go actively, and then switch to, I'm going home. Here are the things I'm going to be doing. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. It makes me think like rituals are important, right? Like
Yeah,
having
there
like
can be some rituals to it for sure.
Like every time I'm done with my shift and I get in my car, or if I'm someone who commutes on a train or whatever, like I have my transition podcast or my transition playlist or my whatever that kind of gets me, transitioning from one to the next. I think one thing that I used to do every time I got off a shift, so I would come, like, I didn't want to have to, like, I'd have a commute home and I wanted to be able to talk about what the heck just happened. I didn't even want to wait the 20 minutes to get home. Called my mom.
Yep.
I always called my mom, and I would talk to her on the ride home, and I would say, and this happened, and then this happened, and I could kind of like get that emotional surge out, kind of.
Right.
So I also didn't feel like when I got home and I'm trying to spend quality time with my husband and debrief or in like transition that I still don't have that like ball of like stress or energy that I just needed to get out.
Yeah. And there's this concept, rational detachment, where, I mean, some of the things that you're seeing, I would imagine as a nurse, they're really going to hit home.
Oh,
like,
my God.
My goodness, this could happen to my loved one.
Yeah.
This could happen to me. And it's important to have this rational detachment of, okay, right now I am caring for this person's life. And sometimes your thoughts can start to really spiral. And you start to see that happening in your own. And you kind of have to learn how to take some of those thoughts captive a little bit.
Yeah.
And that could even just be reminding yourself, like, you know what? That's not me. That's not my family right now.
And I might have the emotion of sadness related to this, but that emotion will pass, and I'm not getting like
I am caring for this life, but this is not my life. And we've talked about processing it. For some people, they need some time before they process anything. I'm one of those people. When I would come home, and even to this day, if I have a really tough day, and someone asks me how my day was, the first thing I'm gonna say is fine, no matter how good or bad it was, because I just want time to actually be like, I'm leaving that there.
Yeah.
So there's this just concept of grounding too, where your brain might get caught with, what if that happened to me? What if that happened to my family? Or I just can't stop thinking about how terrible this experience was. You learn there's exercises where you actually engage your five senses and what you see around you, what you smell. And the research there is your brain can't, if you're using your five senses, your brain can't be focused on these things here and still be back in the past of what just happened or the future of what could happen.
Okay.
For me, I have podcasts, and what I'll do sometimes is on the way home, I'll just listen to a podcast and I'll just totally get engulfed in this subject that I'm really, really interested in.
Basketball.
And what it does is it takes my mind back to like, oh yeah, this is my life. And we could go a little bit further into this because there is that idea that this could happen. And I always encourage everyone, there are times to kind of ground yourself and not think about it. There are times to recognize like I'm kind of owning this other person's life and experience, and right now that's not happening and I have no evidence that it's going to. That thought of this could happen, I think it's important that people actually address that and learn how to have some peace and acceptance that we live in a world where
We don't know.
anything could happen. So there's kind of an idea of radical acceptance. For me, I have a faith in God that helps me understand that, yeah, a lot of stuff could happen. There are things that are outside of my control, and I can still rest in that because somebody has control. Or, the things that are out of my control, I can refocus on, well, this is the stuff that is. I can take care of these, and I can let the rest of this stuff go.
I think that's the hard thing as a nurse, because I never realized how crippling the knowledge of what could happen, because depending upon the unit you work on, like a lot of your everyday is somebody else's worst case scenario.
Right.
And it is really hard to pull yourself out of that because you see all the terrible things that could happen.
Yeah.
And disconnecting from that, if you're not it doesn't just happen. And I thought that, I'm a nurse, I should be able to live my life at home and at work, and because I'm a nurse, I can just automatically do it.
Yeah.
And I learned how wrong that was. And it made a huge impact on my life by not being proactive about it. So let's go. So number one is to say that vicarious trauma is part of this.
Yeah.
And then number two was, first you said that, then you said...
Just in general in life, it's important to take care of yourself.
Oh, yes.
Do the things daily that are healthy and that help you be in a better position to manage those difficult situations you're going to be in. Number two, excuse me.
Three.
Boy, counting is tough in my field. Number three, kind of role transition.
Yes.
I have maybe a ritual. I have a blankie that helps me transition
from
one thing
blankie
to the next.
Yeah.
For some people, that can be almost a grounding and distracting for a short period of time that helps them get their mind elsewhere. For some people, it's venting those things out. I think no matter what, at some point you got to vent those out.
Yeah.
Because again, there's that research that stuff that sits here and here, getting it out of your brain. Sometimes, again, that can even just be talking out loud, can be helpful. Learning how to challenge some of those anxious thoughts about what you just saw, what you just went through, and challenge them and understand, like, I don't have evidence right now that that's going to happen with my family. And the idea of accepting, having an idea of peace, that we live in a world that's unpredictable. Being able to come to some radical acceptance about that.
What do you, now in addition to those, let's say you have someone who struggles baseline without adding this transition of becoming a nurse, baseline depression and anxiety, or maybe some other diagnosis like that impacts their life, and now we're getting ready for this huge life transition. Do you have any recommendations about being like proactive about preparing for that or going through it? Yeah,
so I'm biased, but I think counseling is really good. If you're struggling with those things, and you have historically, you've got to be, number one, identifying what are the recommendations for how to deal with these things, which I think is where some of the counseling comes in, and then putting those into practice. So I'm a basketball guy. I tell people, when it comes to, like, I struggle with depression, I struggle with anxiety, and I want to do this really intense job. If I'm a basketball player and I don't have a lot of natural athleticism, sports maybe doesn't fully come natural to me. Does that mean I can't play? No, I can still play, but I got to work a little bit harder. Maybe at the fundamentals. I've got to find ways to be able to stay on the court, because my athleticism, that natural ability, is not necessarily going to do it for me.
I see what you're saying.
So with someone with anxiety and depression, you got to work a little bit harder, probably, to manage some of those stressful things. So you have to be looking at some of those strategies, living a healthy life. That has to be very important. Right. Because it's even tougher for you maybe to handle some of those things. On the flip side, someone with depression, there's research about the impact of being able to take your focus off yourself and put it on others. In some ways that helps a lot.
Yeah.
So going to work and being able to care for others and sharing that, there can be a benefit to that. And then the other thing that I was going to mention there is learning how to be thankful and grateful for what you do have. And, when you come out of those stressful situations, am I building happiness in my life by being thankful and grateful and recognizing, man, I'm so thankful I have this and that, because there's research about how that helps a person.
Expressing like gratitude.
Expressing gratitude helps a person with depression. I mean, it's helpful for everybody. Few other just kind of attitudes and techniques. It's funny, initially when I would hear the word mindfulness, I was like, that's
silly stuff.
That's new age yoga type stuff.
Yoga type stuff.
I like yoga. What it basically is learning how to be in the moment when your mind wants to go to the past or the future.
Yeah.
And so actually being able to sit and practice mindfulness, meaning whether that's in the form of breathing exercises. I think there's some guided imagery that can come into that.
It is a lot harder than people think.
It's harder. Like a few minutes at a time can actually feel like a long time.
Oh my gosh.
There's mindfulness in terms of, boy, I'm really down and my thoughts are just going to all these things I just saw, or these things in my life, or I'm really anxious about the future. I could be washing dishes and practicing mindfulness because I'm noticing, what does the soap and the water feel against my skin?
The five senses kind of thing.
Yeah, because there's an aspect of mindfulness that goes into that. Because again, it's pulling your focus into the present. Because the enemy of the present, in this sense, is the past and the future. Your mind wants to get drawn away. So I kind of just throw a million things out there.
That's a lot of things, but
they're
very good things.
Yeah. But with the anxiety and depression, I think you have to, you got to know your basics, your strategies. You got to work a little bit harder.
Yeah. And one thing too, especially if you are a nurse working at a larger healthcare facility, a lot of healthcare facilities have what's called EAP, Employee Assistance Program, where they have counselors available for free, anonymously for their staff. I have utilized EAP counselors, and it was free and lovely and completely anonymous. And it was actually, I was having trouble disconnecting. I didn't realize how hard it was. I didn't realize being intentional about it, and it was seeping into my personal life, and I didn't know how to disconnect. And it was turning into anxiety and whatnot. And I was able to sit down with a counselor and really get some good strategies and ways to manage that and be intentional about it, so it wasn't crossing over, because it does so very slowly, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, I am having anxiety about things that are normal life, and that's shouldn't be happening. So encourage you guys to look at EAP if you are someone who thinks that would be beneficial. And it doesn't need to be a long-term thing, even if it's after like a traumatic event at work and you just need some help processing that event, that you can have like a one-time session kind of thing. And usually it's covered by your organization because they want you to be, taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and two more quick things. I know I'm saying a lot here on this, but just in general, there's the idea of attunement.
Attunement.
When you're going to work with,
I like that one.
With people who are going through a whole lot of pain, and they could be throwing some things at you in terms of anger, frustration, irritation because of their own pain. Being able to be attuned to that and understand they're throwing all this stuff up here at me because of this down here, this really bigger issue they're going through. That starts with being attuned to yourself, understanding what you're thinking and feeling, being able to check in with yourself on how you're doing. That's all a part of self-care. That goes into mindfulness of, I've got to make sure that I'm in a good place. And that helps me go in and work with these people. Does that make sense? Yeah,
because I feel like a lot, what I've been on the receiving end a lot as a nurse is emotional dumping from families and patients, because they're going through a very emotional experience. And as the nurse, like in normal life, like if you say, I had a really tough day and I just need to talk about it, I have the ability to be like, you know what, I'm not in a space right now to do that, and that's okay, but not at work. Like it's not usually I can't say it's not okay, but to tell a family member you can't express your feelings right now because blah, blah, blah,
Right.
is, I don't know how that would be viewed, but.
Yeah, and the other thing with that is just for the anxiety, the idea of control. Because a lot of times with anxiety, it's a lot of catastrophizing. What if this?
Yes.
What if that?
Yeah.
Sometimes it helps to identify, just practically, have I done everything that's within my control? Because sometimes anxiety can be alleviated by having a good game plan. I'm sure you know that as a nurse.
Yeah.
This is my game plan. And then your mind can say, what if this? What if that? What if I do this wrong and I get this in trouble? Get back to the moment. Here's my game plan. These are the things that are within my control. If the stuff I'm worrying about, I actually can't do anything with, then learning how to let that go and refocus back on, here's my game plan. Here's what's in my control right now. Here's what's in front of me.
You know, excuse me, when I felt like I got really confident at the bedside, was when I felt like I didn't know all the answers, but I felt like I could troubleshoot what was going on. And that was just brought anxiety down for me. But that kind of reminds me of that. Like, I'm not going to have the answer to everything, but I feel like I can troubleshoot as much as possible and kind of just let go of that other stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
This is all good stuff. I'll put links in under this video of examples of things we're talking about. We are going to have another module on journaling and self-compassion and that kind of stuff that kind of practically puts actionable steps behind the concepts we're talking about, because this is all really good stuff. And everybody's rituals are going to look different. Like, what's going to transition your brain from work to home is going to be different than what would work for me. But I'll put some different ideas and things that you can consider with this video. So yeah, I think that rounds out this video.
All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.